In Springfield can call the Morning Line program at 862-9977. If you're outside the metro area, call 1-800-375-0056 toll-free. And remember, Morning Line callers are limited to one call every other day.
I like the weather, man. Sunshine today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sunshine, sunshine, sunshine. Woohoo! These clouds are going away, folks, and then we're going to be in a high pressure. And the temperature is going to be around 80 every day, so looking good. This is Morning Line on AM 560 KWTO. My name is Tim, and I have on the line Dave. Dave, are you there?
I'm here, Tim. Great to be on with you and your listeners.
How are you doing? This is David Stokes from the Show Me Institute, and I hope that folks will turn up your radios because we're going to talk about some very interesting things. Advancing liberty with responsibility by promoting market solutions for Missouri public policy. That's the mission statement of the Show Me Institute. Tell them, Willie, what you guys are all about.
Well, we're about doing what that mission statement says, and we do it through publishing policy studies and opinion pieces in newspapers and discussing these issues on great talk shows like yours and getting around and addressing groups and testifying before legislative bodies. We do whatever it takes to sort of spread this free market message.
All right, showmeinstitute.org if you want to learn more, showmeinstitute.org. And I wanted to start, Dave, with a column that you have written, David Stokes, and it's entitled, Switching to Private Utilities Could Fund Springfield's Pension Shortfall. And this is an interesting view and some research that you've done about city utilities and the fact that Springfield is one of the largest utilities that is public. Talk about it.
Well, right. That article, I wrote it a couple of years ago when Springfield was having a real problem with funding some local pension issues, and eventually the voters decided on a sales tax increase, if I recall. But I don't know if people in Springfield realize that the model for utilities in Springfield needn't be the model that you have to follow. It was sort of one giant behemoth, that is government-owned and operated. And Springfield is really, it's sort of a Memphis-style model where you just have one extremely large government-operated utility, and it doesn't have to be that way. The private sector can provide utility services perfectly well. And in St. Louis and Kansas City, which I think at first blush most people would think are more government-oriented places than Springfield, in both of those towns, most utilities are provided privately through private regulated companies. And in St. Louis County, where I live, that's one of the largest locations in the country where every utility is privately provided and government isn't involved except as a regulator. We have a private water company, a private electric company, and a private gas company serving St. Louis County, and Kansas City and St. Louis City have private gas and private electric, although they do provide a municipal water division.
What are the positives and negatives, the pros and cons with a private utility as opposed to what we have as a public utility?
Well, there's a lot of positives, and there's a few cons, too. The positives are that the tax base is wider. These utilities in all these communities, when they're private, are among, if not the largest property taxpayers to those cities and counties. So you have a wider tax base, and you just have the general efficiency improvements that come from the private sector. Now,
from free enterprise.
From free enterprise. Now, these things are monopolies. The utility industry is commonly considered our most known example of a natural monopoly. So there's a role for regulation here. And I don't want anyone listening to think I don't think there's no role for government in this type of regulatory system. There is. But you have this system, and hopefully over time, as technology improves, we can figure out ways to increase competition in these industries through the private sector, which is what we saw in telecommunications and cable television, which in the past decades were heavily regulated by government. But as we all know, you can't turn on the TV or radio without hearing an ad for a cell phone company or a satellite cable company now. The need for regulating those former utilities has gone away, and now they're completely done in the free market. I would love to see over time some of that done, particularly to the electricity industry.
Let me ask you this
there
about
are states that have competition.
Let me ask you about Springfield in particular. Is it even possible to imagine that Springfield could have a private utility that pays taxes instead of what we have now?
Well, it's possible to imagine it. I think about it all the time. But yes, it would require a change of the city charter. I mean, it's in the city charter that city utilities operate in this fashion. But I'd love to see the people of Springfield, really start to consider the great deal of potential wealth that's there by breaking up city utilities and auctioning it off to private bidders. I mean, there is an enormous amount of money available to the citizens of Springfield via the government to do that. And that has been done in Missouri. There are a few suburbs of St. Louis a decade ago that auctioned off their water divisions and Missouri American won both auction processes, and those cities made a great deal of money, and they're much smaller than Springfield. I mean, if Springfield were to break up and auction off city utilities, I mean, you're talking a likelihood of potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in total worth there that can go to the city.
Isn't that something? All right, David Stokes is here with the Show Me Institute, and for more information about this and other issues, you can go to showmeinstitute.org, showmeinstitute.org. And speaking of utilities, I wanted to visit for a few minutes this morning about coal and the fact that a lot of folks, when they get their utility bills, when their lights go on and off, that's started by coal, and not just here, but all over the country. And why is it that coal, it seems, this administration is attacking what is making our electricity so available and abundant and so cheap?
Well, it is an unfortunate situation here because coal powers Missouri. I was getting some stats before coming on. Coal provides 42% of the electricity in the United States. Now, it's much higher in a state like Missouri. I think it's probably in the range of about 70% of our power comes from coal. So there is no way that the administration or other environmental groups, people opposed to coal, or people attempting to impose overly stringent new standards on clean coal technology, which over time should be improved and should be built into the system, but requiring to do it right now, I mean, that would really raise costs dramatically for much of the United States, and particularly in Missouri.
You talk about a tax hike.
Has a role.
I mean, a tax hike would be on your utility bill. But this is an attack on the coal industry by the Obama administration, and everyone is going to feel that, regardless of whether you are rich or poor.
Absolutely. And one of the particularly frustrating things for the administration is the refusal to support the Keystone Pipeline, because the free market is bringing another alternative to coal forward in natural gas through fracking technology. And natural gas has tremendous potential benefits and is already accomplishing amazing things for cleaner energy and more American-produced energy and reduced output on reduced dependence on foreign oil. I mean, natural gas is got great potential, and we need to be supporting proposals like the Keystone Pipeline, which will really improve service of natural gas to the people of Missouri and give our electrical companies here a choice. They should have ready access to natural gas so that they can choose whether they want to expand their natural gas power plants or over time continue to invest in the technology to improve coal. But these type of over-the-top mandates from the EPA, drawn a lot from ideology, are not going to serve a lot of Americans. They're certainly not going to serve Missouri.
More with David Stokes from the Show Me Institute, and we'll take your phone calls, 862-9977 and 1-800-375-0056. David Stokes is here from the Show Me Institute on Morning Line, AM 560 KWTO. David Stokes is here from the Show Me Institute. For more information, showmeinstitute.org, or you can telephone for information at 314-454-0647. 314-454-0647 for the Show Me Institute. Gerard is on with David Stokes. Hi, Gerard. How are you?
Just fine. I live in Springfield, have city utilities, and I also have a cabin in Taney County. And I have Show Me State utilities, and my rates in Taney County are considerably higher than Springfield. What's the rates in Kansas City and St. Louis compared with Springfield?
How are the rates compare from a private utility to a public, Dave?
On average, rates for investor-owned...
I'm not talking about average, I'm talking about specific.
Well, on average, the privately owned utilities tend to be a little higher than the government-owned utilities.
Higher, they're a lot higher.
Well, that's the averages are a little higher. And then if you compared St. Louis rates to Springfield rates, I think you'd find them to be very similar. I think the last time I checked that out a year or so ago, the average St. Louis rate was a little higher.
20% higher.
Well, I don't think it's 20%. And the Memphis City Utility releases an annual report that anybody here can check out. If you get online and Google Memphis Utility Average Cost Report, they compare cities around the country with all different services to get those comparisons. And the St. Louis rates are really only slightly higher than Springfield. But this is a very important point, is that oftentimes the publicly owned utilities, the government ones, are subsidizing those costs. I mean, the rates might be lower because it's politically advantageous for the politicians to keep them lower. And those low rates are sometimes preventing the utilities from investing in the infrastructure that they need to do. That's not good in the long run, to not be reinvesting in your infrastructure. So these lower rates really aren't always a benefit.
So the lower rates to the consumer might be there on average. However, a private utility pays taxes back into a system, thereby other taxes might be lower.
Absolutely.
I hope I can get my head around that. 86.
Absolutely, you do see that, and that's an effect. And private utilities charge a little more on average, but they have an incentive to invest back in their own system in the long run.
And they pay taxes.
Absolutely, they pay substantial taxes.
They pay taxes. Private industry pays taxes, and that's what you want, right?
That's absolutely what you want. This is how you expand your tax base and keep it lower for everybody else.
862-9977 and 1-800-375-0056. Okay, so here I'm going to be kind of a devil's advocate here. I don't like coal. It's dirty. People get killed in the coal mines, and I'm for stopping and regulating and making it more and more difficult to have coal. I'd like us to be on a solar and a wind energy type of a system, because that type of energy doesn't hurt anybody other than a flying bird every once in a while into a windmill. But I'm against coal because I think it's a dirty fossil fuel. What would your response be to that?
The response is that the output we can get from wind and solar and other renewables just is not anywhere near the minimum capacity this country needs to function. Right now, we only get 13% of our energy needs from renewables across the country. And the biggest part of that 13%, Tim, is the water resources, particularly out in the western United States. So, and obviously, water power is fabulous. That is among the greatest of energy sources. So you take water out of that total renewable, and wind and solar and the others and biofuels are producing even less. They just will not and probably never be able to produce the minimum load that we need, not to mention that the small amount that they do produce is heavily, heavily subsidized by taxpayers.
So it all sounds rosy and pretty, and coal sounds dirty, but the fact of the matter is we're not going to have energy if we keep attacking the coal industry. That's what makes what was your statistic about the amount of energy that's produced by coal?
It's 42% in the country, coal alone, and renewables are 13%.
42% of our energy is made by coal. So why would the administration and why would current the folks in charge in Washington be against a product that creates 42% of our energy?
Well, they're against it because, look, in the long run, we do need to improve coal technology in this country. There are ways to do it better, but to just impose these rules rapidly, just dramatic rules, is just going to increase costs so heavily for the average consumer that would really, it needs to be stopped, because it would really have a dramatic effect on the quality of life in much of this country, including our state. And if you want to be focused on renewable energy, clean energy with real future, you really need to be looking at allowing for natural gas to grow through fracking and pipelines like the Keystone Pipeline, and ways to allow for nuclear energy to expand. We all have fears of disasters with nuclear power, but the fact is it is a safe an effective way to provide power.
And you mentioned fracking. That's the latest technology. It's not new, but we're using it, and it's expanding in oil and natural gas industry to the point to where, because of fracking, the United States could be energy independent and not have to buy fossil fuels from our enemies.
I mean, the potential for natural gas and fracking is sort of mind-boggling. I mean, it is dramatically reducing our dependence on foreign oil. It is having, and that's just going to grow in the coming decades. And it's going to lower costs. It is a clean type of energy. It might not be as clean as the renewables or nuclear power, but it is a comparatively clean energy. It's going to be good for our environment, good for our economy, and good for our, most importantly of all perhaps, our foreign policy, as we no longer have to buy oil from our enemies.
David Stokes is here, a policy analyst with the Show Me Institute. And for more information, you can go online, showmeinstitute.org, or telephone 314-454-0647. Tom is on the telephone for David Stokes. Good morning, Tom.
Hey, Tim, I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, typical propaganda that he's running here. First of all, he's not talking about what's going on in Japan with Fukushima right now. He's all for nuclear energy, yet we have nuclear waste right now pouring into the ocean. We've had radiation raining down in St. Louis, Missouri that's been measurable. There's big problems over on the West Coast with radiation, yet it's something that we need to be exploring more here. I mean, and then you got him talking about coal, clean as a clean energy. And yes, coal is something we're going to have to continue to stay on until we find better ways. But fracking is not a good alternative, and I've talked about that in the past. But the fracking is destroying water supplies all over the country.
Where?
Where? Okay.
Where?
In Wyoming, in Texas. I mean, all you have to do is pull your head out and do a little research, and you'll find out what's going on.
Well, my friend, I hope...
Rather than just thinking that this is a great technology. What they're doing is they had to remove EPA rules, Tim, to be able to get the fracking done. That was done by Cheney whenever he was in office.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
You can disagree all you want, but you're wrong.
Okay, all right.
You can go around and turn on water faucets around the country and light it with a match.
Oh, now that's just one incident. And it's not.
That's not one incident.
Okay.
It's multiple incidents, Tim. Just because you had somebody come on after me and try to defend it because he works for that industry doesn't make him right.
We'll have to agree to disagree, but thanks for the call, Tom. 862-9977 and 1-800-375-0056. Nuclear is, I know that what happened in Japan is terrible and tragic, and we don't want that, but the track record of nuclear is actually pretty good, huh, Dave?
The track record of nuclear in the United States is terrific. The 3 Mile Island incident got an enormous amount of attention and was well-timed with a movie back in '79, but the amount of damage it did was extraordinarily minimal. I mean, obviously we're familiar with Chernobyl and we're familiar with Fukushima. The Chernobyl incident was a problem with terrible management, and the Fukushima was a tragic combination of multiple disasters in there. Look, we need to do nuclear energy very carefully, but if we're looking to both move in a cleaner direction for energy, and I think the caller would like us to have reduced dependence on coal, renewables like solar and wind aren't enough. I mean, you cannot depend on them to have the lights come on when you flip your switch. It's not. And the idea that it's ever going to be that way, I mean, we're decades and decades away at best, and probably never, to where we can focus on things like that. Nuclear energy and natural gas are excellent ways to move us away from coal, and frankly, coal can improve itself in the long run. What we can't have is just dramatic new rules, dramatically increasing costs on Missourians right now.
What about the fracking idea that it's hurting the water supply?
Well, I think that there's a lot of research being done right now, but what the caller said is not proven at all. He said, we have propaganda. Well, that's his propaganda. Look, the EPA is investigating it. The states actually control fracking, not the EPA, which I think is a good thing. But we're going to find out here. I don't think in the long run that these prophecies of harm are going to come true. I mean, they rarely do. The environmental left is very good at stoking fears, and very bad at looking at the facts.
Nobody wants to harm the water supply. But it makes sense to me if we can get more energy out of the ground safely. We don't have to be so supportive of our enemies and their supply of fossil fuels. Well, it's a very interesting discussion, and it will continue, this debate. And David Stokes is here from the Show Me Institute. For more information, showmeinstitute.org, or you can telephone 314-454-0647 to learn more about the Show Me Institute. What are you guys working on?
Well, your listeners can also follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes. And right now we're working a great deal on education in Missouri, and I know you've talked about that with James Scholes from our office. There's so much going on with school transfer issues around the state and unaccredited school districts, and I'm working on a lot about privatization, which will certainly encompass utilities going forward.
We'll talk again, and I appreciate your time. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Tim.
David Stokes from the Show Me Institute. For more information, showmeinstitute.org, showmeinstitute.org, or telephone 314-454-0647.